Ave, true to Christ. Hey everybody, this is Charitable Christianity, and today we are going to be talking about the 4 types of bad Christians that Trent Horn talked about. The video is going to be in the description, so if you want to see the video yourself, I would highly recommend watching it. But I'm just going to focus on the types that he talked about. I thought it was really interesting for this topic specifically, and at the end he talks about Nick Fuentes, so I'll weigh in on that as well. So the first one that he talks about in the video is the cafeteria Christian, and the Christian compass that he has, you have conformity versus anti-conformity, morally lax versus morally rigorous. And so first we have to understand the 4 quadrants before we even get into the cafeteria Christian. So if you have somebody that's more into conformity, you're going to have somebody that is more in making sure that we conform to societal standards and that we are being more of what society expects us to be. Anti-conformity, you're going to be looking for more of a, I don't want to be like this, I don't want to be anything like what society expects me to be. Morally lax and morally rigorous. Morally lax is going to be more like we just, we don't have to be as strict to the rules, but we are going to be really... we're just going to do whatever we want, man. Morally rigorous is going to be more like legalism. If you get far enough to the right, it's going to be about following the letter of the law and making sure that we do things in the proper way. And I mean, if you, where I would be is I would probably be right about here when it comes to the Christian compass, as far as like with what I just said, where I do believe in conformity and I do believe that we need to have be more morally rigorous, but I'm in the middle here where I'm not like too far this way, because I do strongly believe in conformity. We need to submit to the church. We need to submit to our leaders and our prelates, and we got to realize that we still need to be Catholic and we still need to be Christian or whatever denomination we are, of following the Lord, following the Lord's commands. We have to do that. There's not an option in that, and sometimes it'll go in the face of society. But I guess when I meant conformity and society, I misspoke. I meant the church, conforming to the church. But I'm more morally rigorous too, because I'm big about following the laws. I'm not going to be in agreement with the other quadrants, because once we start becoming morally lax, now it becomes about leaning on our own understanding. Once we start becoming morally lax and anti-conformity, now we're just doing whatever we want. And if we're morally rigorous but we're anti-conformity, we're trying to follow our own version of legalism, but we're refusing to submit to the church, and I don't think that goes in a good direction. So anyways, for cafeteria Christian, what you're looking at is your basic non-denominational, or evangelical, where they're here. They think that there still is like a standard that we need to conform to, but it's more of what we believe is the standards of the church. So there's a little sleight of hand there where it's like for example, when they tell you the judge not, lest you should be judged, or do what I used to do when I was a Free Methodist and take John 20:23. If you forgive their sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive their sins, they are not forgiven. And I look at that and I'm like, oh, that means that if we forgive people's sins, then they are forgiven. But if we don't forgive people, they're not going to be forgiven. And that's totally ignoring the context before, which is Jesus breathed on the apostles and gave them the authority to forgive sins. So we have to be careful when we're leaning on our own understanding, and then we just make our own version of the church, because it goes into so many bad directions. And this is why the cafeteria Christian is a bad Christian, because they're just basically picking and choosing whatever they want to represent the faith without thinking of the context. So next, we have the progressive Christian.
Ignores it. These are the progressive.
So the progressive Christian, you're having somebody who also believes in conformity, but they've gone on the morally rigorous so far that they are only believing in legalism. They're believing that things like, well, okay, but when it comes to lying with another man, when it talks about that in Deuteronomy, they're talking about a young man, so that doesn't actually mean homosexuality, because at that time there was a lot of servants of men sleeping with other young male servants, so it doesn't actually mean homosexuality. And we just take we're kind of like the cafeteria Christian, where we're just taking a little bit of whatever we want, and now it's changed into, we're doing this under the guise of conformity of, it's like, well, clearly this is what the church fathers talked about, and this is what the ecumenical councils talked about, so this completely defends my position. Whereas, like I said, I'm more right here, where we haven't gone so far into legalism, where I realize that I have this book, this crazy book that has, oh shoot, that's the wrong one. I have this crazy book called the Catechism of the Catholic Church that has a collection of what the Catholic Church actually believes. So what I do is I take what I'm seeing on the Bible, and then I'm reading in the Catechism what actually, like, how they interpret that section. And then I use that to temper my own worldview, so I don't become a cafeteria Christian and I just choose whatever I want. But I also don't become so legalistic that now I'm just making excuses for whatever behavior is I feel is correct, and I'm just trying to literally use the Bible to confirm my bias. Fundamentalists. We have the fundamental Christians, which are anti-conformity and morally rigorous, where they believe in we need to go back to the basics. We need to make sure that everything's like how it used to be. And they might be the type of people that's like, Vatican II is the reason that the Catholic Church is so cucked. Or you have ortho bros that are like, everything after the Seventh Ecumenical Council is unacceptable, and we can't look at it at all. Where people are so focused on how things used to be that they still have that legalism aspect, but now they're refusing to submit to any church body or anything like that, because they have this view that it's been corrupted and it's not worth taking in at all. And then we have the last one, which is the
last group of bad
hypocrites and
Christians,
barbarians.
those who rebel against society's rules and even God's rules. So who are these people? I divide them into two groups: the hypocrites and the barbarians. The hypocrite might sound like a Puritan. Hypocrites and the barbarians.
So we have the hypocrites and the barbarians. So since we're getting into morally lax, anti-conformity territory, again, morally lax is going to be more of, we're doing what we want instead of what God wants. And with the hypocrites, they're expecting you to fulfill this, whatever they have in their mind of what religion actually is, but they don't completely follow it themselves. Or logically speaking, if you follow the logical train of what they actually believe, it doesn't make sense at the end of the day. So, like, for example, if you believe that Jesus did 9/11 and Jesus kills people because they deserve it, okay, how is that congruent with what he told us in the New Testament about putting coals of shame on your enemy and feeding them when they're hungry and giving them drink when they're thirsty and clothing them? Why do we do that then? And how do you reconcile with that? Or if you have a view that women have always were supposed to be in the kitchen, and that women were always supposed to be submissive to men, well then what about when Paul was talking about that men husbands should submit to their, or women, wives should submit to their husbands, and husbands should give their full body and sacrifice for their wives, and to lay down their life, or that even Jesus is saying that we should lay down our lives for our friends. You know, why would, or I mean, you could even say that about people that are like, that are morally lax and anti-conformity, and saying like, well, there's double submission. You know, men and husbands are supposed to submit to each other, which is bad theology. You've read the passages wrong that you're talking about. But it's the kind of idea of hypocrites where they've made their own. They've done like the cafeteria Christian, where they've made their own version of the church, but you know they become the church at that point, where they're just a bunch of like statements that that are incongruent with each other, and just doesn't make a lot of sense. And now they've just made this abomination of what Christianity is. And then you have the barbarians, which put themselves in what you can see a rare Pepe, a Pope Pepe, where they've put themselves in the position of being executioner and judge, jury, and executioner, where they have their own version of what the based version of the church was supposed to be. And they're going with that rather than submitting. And what you get with barbarians is they are very big about debate online. They're big about that everybody's an idiot but them. They lack a lot of self-awareness, and they don't really understand what Christian ethics really are. And so it can make it hard for them to actually make a convincing argument because they've lost the sauce so much. But there's a thing that he has about Nick Fuentes that I think was pretty interesting. So he has a little bit about Nick Fuentes, and the person that originally requested, that shared this video in the Discord, they didn't request it. I decided to make a video because I thought it'd be interesting to talk about this. When my friend Angelina had watched this video and saw Nick for the first time, she was very distraught on how much hate is in Nick's heart. And, you know, she wanted us to pray for Nick because she's really concerned about his salvation. And she's a converted Catholic, just like I am. And I feel the same way as her. I think that Nick, you know, he's going down a dark path, and it's very unfortunate. But this clip definitely doesn't
one
make
in Christ
it
Jesus.
a good look for him.
For more on this, see my previous episode, How Being Based Can Send You to Hell. And among Catholics, it's not hard to find clips of Nick Fuentes saying vile things that both the church and secular society would condemn.
Jews are running society. Women need to shut the up. Blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part. And we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
And when I said in a previous...
So there is some context to that, guys. First of all, Nick is trolling, as he usually does, but this is why it's so hard to get Nick down to a specific point of view, because he often trolls a lot, and he gives up his own views of God for his trolling. So when he's talking about Jews around the world, he actually does believe that Jews are bankrolling a lot of things. When he says that women need to shut the F up, he does actually believe that kind of. So he believes that women need to be submissive to men, but he doesn't understand the relationship between a married man and woman and a non-married man and woman. And so he conflates the two. Black people being in prison, that's more of him trolling, because since black people commit such a high rate of murder, and almost 3 times the amount of their population of stealing and whatnot. If you guys don't remember, I did look at the FBI stats that they released in 2019, which is the last batch that they had. But it was actually really consistent from when they first started doing it in 1970, I think, is when the first time the FBI actually decided to get stats. And what we found out is white people and black people are really problematic when it comes to crime. But all the other races are really good at keeping their noses clean. which is really impressive. But because of the high murder rate and the high crime rate in black communities, that's why he's saying just imprison them, and that's going to solve all the problems. But again, it like what Trent Horn was saying, it goes against Catholic and secular ethics. So it makes it hard for him to really find a footing with anybody. And like I talked about in my last video, I don't believe that Nick Fuentes is actually Catholic. It's really hard for me to believe in that. But Nick Fuentes actually responded, and again, this shows why Nick Fuentes is a young man, and when it comes to
Previous
these kind of
episode, I
topics,
wouldn't debate people who insulted my wife by calling her a crazy bitch. In other words, people like Nick Fuentes. This was Fuentes' response to me and my wife, Laura.
Oh, my family, you attacked my family, you called my wife a bitch. Well, okay, you're a bitch, she's a bitch, you're a couple of bitches. You and your wife and your whole family are bitches. You got a whole family of whiny, lying bitches. Is that better?
Well, what would be better is if you
absolute savage comeback that Trent Horn gives, and I'll play that in a moment. But Trent Horn does not have to debate with anybody, okay? He has made so much content that there's just about most of his videos, you could play a lot of his videos and answer somebody's questions. He doesn't have to debate anybody. Nick tends to do this thing where he tries to do like this macho man, you should debate me, otherwise you're a pussy type of mentality. And he just frames everybody as anybody who doesn't want to fight him, or it's like he's playing Call of Duty or something and he's in a COD lobby. And you know how everybody's like, oh, you're scared. Oh man, you're mad. And that's fine for young men. Young men can do that. But eventually you have to grow up and become an adult and realize that you can't be going to war with everybody. And again, being a Catholic, we need to treat everybody with dignity. So slinging insults, slandering people, calumny, all these things are going to be bad for our soul. And this is why Trent Horn isn't engaging in it and is trying to set the record straight.
you submitted yourself to a spiritual director, maybe someone like Father Ripperger, so you can learn to behave in an actually Christ-like way and not like an overgrown 12-year-old screaming into his Xbox Live headset. And on a personal note, I want to say one reason I love being Catholic is that the church has rigorously presented what is forbidden, permissible, and obligatory in the Christian life through materials like the Catechism to help us avoid the errors of moral laxity and rigid fundamentalism. But I'm also grateful for the many Protestants who strike a balance in the areas of moral rigor and help Christians be normal without acting like total normies. So those are the 4 bad kinds of Christians, and I pray.
So those are the 4 types of bad types of Christian from my point of view instead of Trent's point of view. So hopefully if you guys watch the video or decided you're going to watch the video now, and you can compare and contrast what I said and what Trent Horn said, I think that gives you a good idea of what to watch out for and how to not fall into that. Because like I said, I don't know if I said it in this video, I talk so much, but having the catechism is so important because you can, and especially if you get the Didache Study Bible, because in the Didache Study Bible, and I know I've talked about this before, but it bears repeating, when you have, oh shoot, actually that's a bad one. Well, you know what? This one's bold. This will be a good one. So when you have topics in here or study notes, you'll see that in this, if you want to pause and read this, they have the catechism references, and you can literally go in and then read what it says in the catechism, and then have a good idea of what the church stands for. And at the bottom, you'll see that they have things that you can reference, or let me go to a different page. So they'll have things that you can reference or other church documents that you can use to really have a full view of what does the church say on this, and how do we know what the lines are? Because in so many other denominations, they don't really have a universal guide on how do we properly conduct ourselves as Christians. A lot of it's by area or based on denomination or based on our own interpretations of what the church should be. And that leads to a lot of problems. But that's everything, guys. Feel free to tell me what you think in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you guys have a blessed day. Peace be with you. And